Hello and welcome to the Drunkduck Quackcast. I'm as an ocean, with me is Tance and Baines. Hello.
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 And I'm as an ocean, and this is Quackcast number 709, and we're talking about dragons. We're back. We're talking about dragons, but first I've got to talk about the featured comic. And I featured a comic this week called Gurs. So I'm going to start talking about Gurs now. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Gurs. Starting as a 24-hour comic when the author was stuck inside during Hurricane Ingun, Gurs later expanded to become a great little slice of life humor comic that comments on the life of a young guy. It features great little observational shots of humor that are often quite subtle, yet very simple in delivery. The style is raw, sketchy, bold, line art in a penciled style. It's definitely worth checking out just because of how refined it becomes. The first 24-hour comic part, where it's just solidly in pencil, is a lot more sketchy and immediate and less refined. But then as it's refined into more of a 3-panel, 2-panel, 1-panel sort of comic, it becomes very, very honed, and the line work is very solid and smooth and bold. And it's really interesting to see that transition. And then you can basically follow it along as, a 3-panel humor comic. And the observations are quite interesting because not only are they sort of slice of like general humor, but it's also very specific humor just based on Gurs, this fellow. And there's probably a lot of reality thrown into the humor, based on observational stuff from his real life. So anyway, have a check of Gurs, and I hope you enjoy it. It's a good little comic. And this is by Gustav I Am, and it's rated T for teen. And that was me talking about Gurs. Okay, so now the featured music. Gummels has been too busy this week to come up with the featured music, so I'm going to pick a best of. And the best of I picked this week was Dragonet. And can you guess why I picked this? Well, because of the theme of this particular Quackcast talking about dragons. So I delved deep into the archives and picked Dragonet from, I think it featured in Quackcast number 251. So that's ages ago, like years ago. So it's worth a little comeback. Anyway, so this music is royal, commanding, and bleak. So take it away, Gummels, with your early piece of music, Dragonet. That was Dragonet, Gummels' interpretation of the comic by Will Gunn, and it's rated E for everyone. I hope you liked that featured piece of music. Alright, that was one of my faves. So now, in this particular Quackcast, we're talking about the subject of dragons. Dragons. Now, dragons are a pretty cool thing. very central in fantasy, mythology, culture, just religion, all the way through, which is a really weird thing to have them be such a universal thing, because they don't exist. And they never existed.
Yeah.
And they can't exist. Because there's things that a dragon does that, are just beyond reality. But they're so central in our culture because they're such a formative thing. And literally they're formative because these dragons create the world in a lot of cultures. Say the Australia Aboriginal culture, there's this creature called the rainbow serpent, which is basically a giant dragon. It doesn't have wings, it's just a gigantic snake, which is, very typical for dragon kind of serpents in many cultures. And this creature is known by a lot of different names. Rainbow serpent is kind of the English name for it, but all the different language groups know him by all different names. No, it's not him. And this creature created everything, created the stars and the earth and any landmass you see, from little kind of water pools to huge mountains to, ditches in the ground. This creature created it all. So there you are. But that's hardly singular, and all these different cultures, these dragons can be, these very elemental things that just form the world. But dragons, not only that, they can be symbols of wisdom. They can be symbols of evil, ultimate evil, like sneaking, horrible evil. And particularly in Christianity, which kind of took on dragons and rebranded them. But not only that, before Christianity even existed, there were religions that also, had them as evil creatures as well. So they're all over the place. Dragons. So what are your guys' favourite dragons? I mean, so, Baines, you tell us. You're
I've always thought here. That... what was that? I'm sorry?
You're the oracle here. The Dragon Master.
Well, the main thing I know is that the ancient Greek root for the word dragon is actually a verb that means to see clearly.
That's incredible, Baines.
I've read a little bit about that. Yeah. So, no, Tense just wrote that in our chat. But what I know is just a tiny bit. I've never read a ton of fantasy or been super interested in fantasy mostly, but I love there's Piers Anthony, which is comedic fantasy with his Xanth.
Oh my God, Stanley Steamer.
Stanley Steamer, yeah. And I really was a huge fan of the Myth Adventures by Robert Asprin, which are comedy fantasy, and there's a dragon. He gets a pet dragon by accidentally feeding it. The main character gets a pet dragon. And I think it's either the first or second book. I think it's the second book. The big threat at the end, in that classic fantasy kind of way, is an enormous dragon.
Oh.
And, it's very scary just in the description.
Oh, cool.
So just a tiny amount. Yeah, I don't know. Of course, obviously, I know what dragons are supposed to be in general. And they're amazing and all that stuff.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot.
But you watched the How to Train Your Dragon movie.
Oh yeah, I saw that movie recently, and man, I love that movie.
So
it's about people, really, but
it's
also about dragons. Yeah.
But it rebrands dragons into being cute and cuddly.
That's right. Yeah, they're scary, and then we come to understand them in that movie. So yeah, I thought that was fantastic.
So the main dragon in that is based on a cat almost, like a black cat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, is he based on a cat? I could see that.
That's how I always felt, anyway.
Yeah, the sleek, black, powerful dragon.
Yeah, and sneaky and weird because it's smaller than the other dragons and more crafty and clever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Really neat.
And then everyone gets a pet dragon, don't they? I don't know.
It's sort of like this group of kids, these young kind of kids in this kind of fantasy Viking warrior culture. I just can describe it just in the very basics. But yeah, all of them, and they're training to be warriors, I guess, or whatever. And they're at war. The group is at war with dragons from time immemorial. And the one kid, and then the rest of the group end up being dragon riders. They bond with these dragons.
Yeah.
And dragon riders.
Oh, it's so
these are good.
groovy. All right,
Yeah.
now that reminds me of something. When I was in my teens in high school, I started reading these. I'd run out of all the fantasy books in the library because I just consumed fantasy. But I had this horrible disrespect for sci-fi. I thought, oh, only nerds read sci-fi. I can't stand sci-fi. But I just devoured all of them, so there were no more fantasy books left in the school library. But then there were these other seemingly fantasy books called The Dragon Riders of Pern. And
I know the title.
Yeah, Anne McCaffrey, fantastic writer. And I thought, okay, I'll read them. And they weren't fantasy at all. They were sci-fi. And I thought, oh my God, I've been betrayed. But they were so good that I just kept reading them anyway and enjoyed it. And it was like a crossover between sci-fi and fantasy because it was a society that had genetically engineered these tiny little fire lizards, they called them. You know, when they landed on this planet, right? And then they were like a lost colony pretty much. And what would happen is every like few years, these things called thread, which were these sort of like planetary organisms that existed in the asteroid cloud, would come into their atmosphere and kind of burn up and then just fall on the planet. And when these things hit the planet, they would just devour everything, would just dissolve everything. So the people, out of desperation, these sci-fi people, astronauts, they genetically engineered these little fire lizards, which are little flapping kind of lizard things that breathe fire, into enormous dragons. And what they would do is they would ride them and burn this stuff in the air before it hit the ground. So they have to have teams to burn this stuff. And so that was like the very early version of these stories. But these stories, like, there were a lot of different sequels. And basically they span hundreds of years. And so what happens is they get to a point where there's these things fall down onto the earth like every maybe 100 years, and there's a long period when they're not there, so they have to kind of preserve this culture so people remember it and know what to do next time the signs are in the air and they have to go and kill these things. And what happens is they have some kind of event, galactic event, that stops the thread falling. So it's like another 200 years before it falls, so everyone forgets about it. And this one clever girl thinks that this dragon riding culture still exists, but they don't know why they even exist anymore. They just exist as a kind of like elite, and people have to give them stuff, and they can go around and ride their dragons and burn shit. But this one girl sort of knows about the signs, and she thinks, oh my God, maybe these things are returning, and she's like instrumental in getting them back and retraining people so they can destroy this thread before it destroys their whole civilization. So it's a pretty good series. I recommend it as for young adults and even adults. So yeah, they're really cool. The Dragon Riders of Pern, the White Dragon, a lot of good books about it. So yeah, there we are. Just wax lyrical about the Pern books.
No, it sounds really cool, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, they really were. Anne McCaffrey. My God, I forgot about those until you mentioned dragon riding.
Right.
So yeah, dragons are a big thing in fantasy literature. All different kinds of dragons in different styles. And I've really loved them in the fantasy artwork myself. I always enjoyed that. And it was one of the things that really inspired me to learn to draw dragons and, to become an artist myself of those kind of things. I always envied, artists like Michael Whelan and David Rowe, people who could really draw fantastic dragons, and I'm proud to say that I can draw them like that myself now. So that was my.
Sure can, man. Amazing.
Well, thank you. So yeah, let's see. Dragons have appeared in a few films and things. There was like How to Train Your Dragon. There was a Dragon Slayer, which is a fantastic early 80s fantasy with a dragon. There's a few other dragon movies. There's of course the ones in I think Lord of the Rings or something, or The Hobbit. There's a dragon there.
What's the? There's a post-apocalyptic movie. There might even be a sequel. I don't know. Where it's the world's been destroyed. It's post-apocalyptic, but the enemy is dragons.
There is
very interesting. What's it called? Matthew McConaughey is in it, and
yeah, I think I remember that.
It's so
that
weird.
Yeah, it's one of the things that you wonder if it really happened.
Yeah, I think maybe Christian Bale is the other main actor.
Yeah, that.
I think you're probably right.
Oh my God! Yeah, we should Google that.
It's so weird. It's like there's something burn or something like that. But how does that exist?
Think dragons in the word dragon is in the title. I don't think so. But,
yeah.
I've seen it advertised, and I've just thought, that's so weird. I don't want to watch it. Have you guys seen it? No. Tance is shaking her head no with her microphone off, and Baines has his microphone off, so no one can respond.
Yeah, it's just I'm trying not to let the dogs dominate our cast.
Yes.
They're out, and there are other dogs passing right now, so yeah. But I remember watching it, but I remember nothing about it. So there's that. But there's also Dragonheart with Sean Connery as dragon, like voicing the dragon, and of course Game of Thrones, with what's her name, Khaleesi, being the mother of dragons, and she has 3 dragons that grow over the series. Yeah.
Reign of Fire is the Matthew McConaughey film.
Yes, Reign of Fire.
Okay, yeah.
It's one of these films with a stupid pun in the title, because it's not rain as in rain, but like raindrops. It's rain as in ruling.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right.
There you go. Yeah, Reign of Fire. Strange thing to exist. Yeah, they pop up in films and things like that. And there was an 80s animation called A Flight of Dragons. And that was about a bunch of very weird dragons who would like inhale a lot of air and kind of fart out and stuff like that. And that's how they would fly, by filling themselves with air and flapping with their little wings. And it was quite a weird film, but it was based on a series of stories by, I think, George R.R. Martin. I think his name was. Something, maybe I'm thinking of the wrong guy. Okay, so there's the Game of Thrones guy. I get him confused. So it's not him. It's a different guy. So I think probably got the name wrong. But anyway, this guy who wrote this book about dragons. Okay, so the movie's called A Flight of Dragons, and this guy did a whole bunch of these fantastic stories about a fellow who travels back in time. He ends up in the body of a dragon, and he has to fight a knight called George, and it's called The George and the Dragon.
Yes.
And it's such a cool short story. Yeah, well, it started out as a short story, I don't know, way back in the day, maybe in the 60s or the 70s or the 50s or something like that. It was a long time ago. And then he started writing them as like fantasy stories in the 80s. But he also did this like a weird picture book version of it, which is based on those stories, but it isn't quite the stories, and that's what got turned into that silly film. But yeah, the stories are fantastic. They were just freaking awesome. He started these stories, like maybe in the 60s or the 50s, the short story, and then the novels that he started doing in the 80s kind of took off. It took up right where that story left off, even though it was written like 20 years before, or 40 years before. These stories just picked up as if there was no time passed, and I think that's so cool. And he just kept going and writing them, and in this beautiful fantasy world that his own invention, and it was based on this idea this man can transform into a dragon, and how this man copes being on the other end of the George and the dragon myth.
Right.
Being a dragon.
Cool. Yeah.
So I would highly recommend those as a series. Great fantasy series. So, okay. That's dragons in mythology. I mean, so dragons in fantasy. Oh, we've got to mention Dungeons and Dragons, which is named after dragons. And we've played
Dragon
that.
Slayer, the video game.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but D&D, a bigger deal. Dragons are obviously integral to a whole genre.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of fantasy stories written of that with the dragons in them, because Dragonlance, I think that was the little offshoot, with 7 bazillion stories written by all kinds of contract authors. But yeah, so that's like dragons in fantasy. They're very, very central. But yeah, dragons in mythology. Now, this is where dragons come from, isn't it? So, Tance, you've written that, Neza legend? What's that?
Yeah, no, I haven't written that. That is a famous Chinese myth or fable, or it's part of their general mythology and legends, and it is about this boy that is sort of half demon, but not the demon as we mean it in the West. It's like a spirit boy thing, who ends up facing basically like the Dragon King and his cronies. And it is one of the legends that has become very popular around the world as well. There have been like a couple of animated movies from China that have been like taken up by Netflix, I think, or something like that. So there's that. My dragons are nothing like that.
Just the description you wrote, this the spirit boy versus 4 dragons, sounds like, oh, someone must have grabbed that to turn it into a show.
Yeah. It is really cool. It has some of the most powerful visuals. And I remember like the first animated movie, I was like a little kid when I first saw it on Saturday morning cartoons, which shouldn't be shown then because everything dies. And that's where the story ends, in that because it's just the first part of the legend. But now it has more like updated ways of presenting the legend. It's much more appealing and action-packed and very like impressive visuals that you get. Like, excuse my dogs as usual.
Scary about the dragons, Tance.
Yeah.
They would bark more if they saw a dragon. That would be counterintuitive.
They'd attract it over.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, speaking of that kind of thing, well, there's the famous dragon in Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, really?
Or Dragon Ball, as the original thing was. Yeah, so that's the animation that Pitface really loved, which is based on, of course, the Monkey King and the legendary journey to the West. And it has a big dragon in it, a gigantic kind of spiritual creature where you can, if you can collect I think it's 9 Dragon Balls, I'm not sure. If you can collect them all, you can invoke this dragon and have a wish. And you can wish anything. So that's pretty cool. And originally the story was all based around that, but it kind of expanded beyond that. So yeah, that was a groovy thing. The dragon in Dragon Ball Z. Or Dragon Ball.
Did they eventually summon this dragon?
Many times, over and over and over.
Many times, okay, yeah.
Yeah. For all sorts of various things, yeah. Like wishing someone back to life. That's usually what they wanted to wish for when someone dies. So yeah, death becomes irrelevant, as it does in many things.
Yes. So you were talking on Patreon, I think the video you're talking about the serpent, the rainbow serpent, the dragon that created everything.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so
the mythology and the history of dragons in that sense. What do we know about that?
Okay, so
or should I say, what do you know about that? Because I know nothing.
Well, that's a creature in Aboriginal mythology or indigenous Australians, and that's very central to pretty much all the different cultures that I know of. Because I mean, like, there's hundreds and hundreds of different language groups in Australia, indigenous peoples, and they all have different languages and slightly different cultures and different origins and stuff like that. But the rainbow serpent is a kind of central mythology, and this is a gigantic creature. It's kind of a black-headed creature with a rainbow body, and it was like formed out of the stars and came to Earth and just formed the entire country with its body. So anytime you see a little waterhole, a little cave, all those things were formed by the rainbow serpent. And it changes size in this mythology. So you're right next to a tiny little waterhole. And of course the dragon, the rainbow serpent formed that by resting in there. And also it formed the giant Ayers Rock, which is, I can't remember what the Aboriginal name for it is. But yeah, it forms like massive coastal features. It formed the entire country. So this thing is not only formed things that are like maybe 20 meters big, it formed things that are like 2,000 kilometers long, 8,000 kilometers. So it's an incredible size-changing creature. It can do anything.
Shape-shifting dragons are shape-shifting magical beings.
Very much so, yes. So this is a very, very much an elemental creature.
Yeah. So
yeah, but you have similar kind of creatures in a lot of different cultures. I mean, say in a lot of South American cultures, you had the Quetzalcoatl, I think it's called. Do you guys know it? Quetzalcoatl, yeah, maybe that's it. So that's a rainbow serpent, but it's got wings. That's the difference. Feathery wings, not bat wings like a lot of dragons do, but this has feathered wings. Quetzalcoatl. And this is a very kind of creation oriented creature. So that's not a monster, it's more a god kind of creature, just like the rainbow serpent in Aboriginal mythology. So yeah. And in a lot of other cultures, these things exist as well. Say in like Viking myth, a Viking myth, that's a really, like, these people weren't really Vikings. They were Scandinavians, I suppose. We call them Vikings because that was the thing that when they went on pirate raids, that would be a Viking, but they weren't actually a Viking culture. But before they called themselves that, or before we called them that, they were the Vendel culture. And they had a lot of different dragons in their mythology too. Specifically, there's the world serpent, and I cannot remember his name. This thing is like, I think in Greek mythology you have Ouroboros. And he's very much like that because he spans the entire globe and he bites onto his tail. And yeah, I think that's also Loki's offspring. Loki has a few offspring for some reason. He has an 8-legged horse, a daughter with half her face being a skull, which is Hel, and he has this giant world serpent. But the myth is kind of weird, and the world serpent sort of exists before Loki, and it's there's different stories and they blend into each other. And there's also another one, I think it's called Níðhöggr, and it's a dragon like that. Yeah, Midgard serpent. Yeah, thanks, Tans. And there's also Níðhöggr, which is the other one that lives in the bottom of the roots of the world tree. And the world tree is where we all live. But Níðhöggr lives down in the roots, and it's eating the world tree, trying to kill it. So that's another dragon. And of course, Tolkien was enamored of these things and sort of took up that version of dragons in his stories. So he has a lot of those in the Silmarillion. Not, this famous Smaug. I think that's the dragon from later on, Smaug. But he's not from the Níðhöggr kind of dragon. Who else? Oh yes, and another one of his influences was, of course, the Beowulf story. Beowulf is very famous for his battle against Grendel and then Grendel's mum. But Beowulf's other big adventure was, of course, going after a dragon and going into a dragon's den and trying to get the treasure from this dragon. And I think that's how he ended, I think, from memory. He was never seen from again.
Oh.
So yes, there's dragons in all kinds of Norse mythology, Germanic mythology, I should say, because I was wrong to say this is just a Vendel culture thing. This is all Germanic culture had this same mythology. So this goes down to Saxons and all that kind of thing. Yeah, it's all one group. But okay, Tance, tell us about this hero that showered in a dragon's blood.
I don't remember his name, and he's so famous. It's embarrassing. I think it's from Ring of the Nibelung, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be very mistaken. I think it's from there. So he's supposed to
Siegfried.
be like. Yes, that's the guy. I think that's the guy who sort of dug a hole, and he waited in the hole, and he was all sweaty and stuff, and he slayed the dragon, or the dragon was going to die. I don't remember very well because it's been like decades since I read the Ring of the Nibelung. And he was showered in the dragon's blood that would make him basically immune to any kind of attack by blade or arrow. Except there was this one spot in his back that was not touched by the dragon's blood because he was so sweaty that one leaf was stuck there, and that's the spot where he was not immune. Sort of like an Achilles heel.
Or Balder with the willow.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how he dies. Like someone shoots him exactly there. I think it's Siegfried. I'll just check real quick.
Yeah, I just looked it up. It's Siegfried.
Okay.
So,
awesome.
Yeah. Not Roy, but yeah, Siegfried. So Siegfried is a very famous hero. Yeah. Oh my God, I've forgotten all about him.
Mm-hmm.
I think the German expressionists did a movie about that.
Like when I was like around 16, 17, I was in such a like mythology spree. I would devour all mythologies everywhere that I could get my hands on. And his story stuck with me because I remember it was the first time I remember thinking to myself, okay, he's gonna die by getting impaled or shot or stabbed while I was reading it.
Yeah, it's the Chekhov's gun kind of thing. Chekhov's leaf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's gonna be important.
Yeah.
He got was it Achilles to death?
Exactly. So yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. All right, Siegfried. Well, extra points there for getting that bit of mythology. That's another bit. That's Germanic mythology as well. So
That's
there you go.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, in ancient Greece, you mentioned that. Did you mention that in the video version or the? I think you did.
The dragon of Colchis. I mentioned the one that was guarding the golden fleece, but we have more.
What about Ouroboros?
That was another one called Ladon. They are not very famous internationally.
Okay.
And there was also one that would guard the gate of Thebes. I don't remember his name. So we do have, and all of these dragons were these gigantic, like super big serpents that could talk, and they were wise, which didn't mean that they were like these benign creatures. They were petty as all hell. But they had a lot of knowledge, and they were definitely like ordained by the gods to be guardians for one thing or another. And the other thing I can think of in ancient Greek, mosquito. In ancient Greek mythology that could qualify as a dragon would be the founding father of Athens. His name was Erechthon, and that's where we get the Erechtheion in the Acropolis. And he was supposed to be like this dragon spawn sort of guy. And because he was the child of dragons, he had like his legs were of a serpent, the nature, like he had scales and all of that, and he was like a magical king. So and he made it so that this like valley basin where Athens was going to be was habitable. Because supposedly it was very arid and it didn't have anything, and then he stayed there, and then he made it so appealing that the gods Athena and Poseidon would compete to be the patron god of Athens, and thus give their name to the city. And the idea was like, why couldn't women vote in ancient Athens? Because they would, the citizens of the city would choose which god would be the patron god by vote. And so Athena, threw her spear on the ground, and an olive tree sprouted immediately, full of fruit, full of olives, and ready to give oil. And then Poseidon threw his trident, and this spring of water emerged. But I think that the water was like salty water and not fresh. But that varies depending on who tells the myth. It could also have been like fresh water. But all the women voted for Athena because she was a woman and because she gave oil, which was like a basic staple of your diet. And all the men voted for Poseidon because he was a guy and because they were either stupid and didn't realize it was salty water, or because they preferred the water. But there was one more woman than men in the population, and so the vote was won by Athena. And
Ah.
Poseidon got mad. But I think I was happy about it, of course. But Poseidon got, big mad about it, and he sent a sea dragon, basically a sea serpent. And this is why I'm telling the story, because it has another dragon. um, to terrorize the coasts, like Piraeus, basically, the coasts of Athens. And in order to appease him, they revoked the right to vote from women.
Oh,
And that's
okay.
when. So that's the myth.
Bloody
Wow.
Poseidon. Always a bitch.
Yeah. I won that vote bigly.
He's a very unstable genius.
Mhm.
Oh, goodness me. Well, that reminds me. Also, we have Hydra is taken as being a kind of prototype in fantasy, in science fiction as well, for a monstrous dragon.
Yeah. Well, in Greece, it's Hydra is a completely different monster than dragon, because it is definitely it is not sentient the way that a dragon is, cannot talk, and it is basically like a dinosaur with many heads. And
It's
then
an animal.
it's an animal, but it's a big monster, but animal. It's not like the dragon that has like let me come over here and I will cheat in my so and so conditions for you to pass, and all of that. Like dragons do that. A Hydra is like eat, bite, 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 and that's it.
Yeah, but that's another kind of idea of like a more modern idea of a dragon, and plus maybe the Germanic idea of a dragon, which is more a monster than a god.
Yeah. Well, they basically there is also the concept of like the noble dragon, that is like this creature of like superior ethics and all of that, and is a lot less of an animal. Like there are like two different sides of the Western dragon that I have seen.
Oh yeah. I was just thinking, what's the other famous dragon in mythology? Tiamat. So that's something, I don't know, Assyrian mythology, something, one of these early Arabic, well, not Arabic, but Middle Eastern things. And that was, I think it's a she dragon, and she had 3 heads. Oh, maybe did Tiamat fight against
Let me check.
what was his name?
Tiamat.
Did Tiamat fight against some kind of hero in mythology?
Right. So, all right. She's supposed to be like a primordial goddess of the sea. Yeah, and I think let me see. Oh my
Of course,
goodness.
a lot of people will remember Tiamat from the Dungeons and Dragons animated series, and that would be the monster that would always come up and try and kill the adventurers. With 3 heads and stuff. Do you remember that?
I don't remember the dragon. I knew the cartoon. I watched it, but not avidly.
Okay, and Tart tell us the storm god Marduk killed Tiamat. So
Cool.
there we are. A lot of these mythologies have stories about how, such and such killed a dragon, and that's thought to have been a way of like justifying a changeover in the culture, as this god gained ascendance in the culture because the other one lost popularity. Then people explain that away later, hundreds of years later usually, by saying, oh yes, but actually this god went and killed this person and did this and did that, but in reality what's meant to have happened is, there was a change and this thing lost popularity, and yeah, it's just an explanation.
Right.
Comes in the form of these stories. Although we don't know that for sure. It's just an explanation of an explanation. But yeah, okay, so a lot of those kind of dragons were, very central to mythology, but through that, they became the basis of our fantasy dragons, or cultural dragons. Because Christianity took on dragons as like a servant of the devil, a servant of evil, but not an intelligent demonic, creature, the devil. These are more animal and bestial servants of the devil. So they don't have any intelligence. They just will attack and do horrible things. Usually they'll like eat virgins or something like that. They need them. A sacrifice to appease the dragon, and then some hero comes along and decides that they're gonna kill the dragon, and you won't have to do that anymore. And a lot of early fantasy and fairy tales were based on that idea. But yeah, the dragon that St. George killed, that was that kind of dragon that was harassing the countryside, and he went and killed that for the sake of everybody, and that's his great deed that he did. And St. George was meant to have been, the British celebrate him as their patron saint, but he has nothing to do with Britain. He's comes from, I suppose that kind of Greece and Turkey, that kind of area, doesn't he? So that's his origin.
Right.
There's the famous red dragon that the Welsh have on their flag. I don't think that has anything to do with the St. George dragon, but it might. Who knows? Dragons are so central to our culture, but we haven't even mentioned the South, that kind of East Asian dragon yet in the Quackcast. So mainly they come from China. I think they're the ones who really came up with those particular god and spirit dragons. And there's a lot of different ones. There's the more god ones. There's the ones associated with like royalty who have 5 claws, and the amount of claws I think is very very specific. And then there's the ones that are because you see them like carved in things or painted on stuff, and if it's got 5 claws, then it's associated with the emperor, and if it hasn't, it's associated with something else. I don't know, but it was very central in Chinese mythology, and they also had these dragons associated with, I don't know, like rivers and mountains and winds and things like that. But it's also associated with a lot of the mythology and a lot of surrounding cultures. Japan very specifically has dragons as part of their mythology, and I don't know, but I think dragons are part of a lot of other South Asian mythologies as well, like I don't know, Vietnamese or Burmese, Malay, that kind of stuff. I think there was, of course, a famous film a few years ago. Was it Rava the Last Dragon? Whereas instead of being based on, it's a 3D film like Pixar, but wasn't made by Pixar, and instead of being based on like European mythology, this was based on South Asian mythology. So you had all these like fantasy versions of South Asian cultures coming together, and you had a dragon based on that kind of East Asian mythology, and that was pretty cool. Voiced by Aquafina, I think. You guys know her? This scratchy voiced lady.
Yeah, again, for the little bit of acting that I know of that she's done.
Yeah, she's really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was not a bad film. Although I did have a problem with it though, because it's based on, it's meant to be like wowie, an animation that actually is not, like European or it has a different cultural base. It's based on South Asian cultures, but it's American versions of these South Asian cultures, and that was really off because they were meant to be representing Thai and Burma culture and all this kind of thing, and Vietnam and Laos and all this, but they were entirely Americanized, and it really just seemed to be off. But it was good that they made the effort. Sorry, Tans.
No, now that you mention it, I remember that in The Last Airbender, the series, in the third season, there are two dragons, very Asian dragons, Asian style dragons, blue one, I think, and a red one, if I remember right, that reteach the firebending character Zuko to bend in a way that is not negative, that is not toxic. So they're supposed to be the source of the firebending, because according to the world building, every type of bending stems from one magical creature. Like they have I think some type of badger for the earth bending, and some kind of fish, if I remember right, for the water bending. All of that. Yeah. And air bison, like this thing that Ang is on, is for the air bending. So for the fire bending, they have these very Asian style dragons that do not talk, but you know that they are a lot more sentient than just animals. They are animals, but they also have this sort of mystic energy to them. And I think it was very well done. They were only there for one episode because that was all that was needed. And it was done very well, as opposed to what you said to the other work.
Yeah, okay, that's pretty cool. Well, also you have dragons in your Art of Veiling, I think, and
yeah.
So your version of dragons, they're human dragons, and that is something that exists in mythology as well. There are dragons that take human form.
Yes.
So yeah, your dragons, were they actually dragons that take human form, or they just call themselves dragons?
They call themselves dragons. That's the name of their nation, like the Dragons, but everyone else it doesn't abbreviate, but through the language shift, they call them dragons instead of dragons, which they hate as a nation. No, this is not what we are called. All of that. Here come the dragons. F you. That sort of thing. So they are humans, but they have this very mystical technology, and they have created this alloy, this metal alloy, that is a super well-guarded secret among their nation, that is very, very durable, very, very hard and resilient, but also very, very light and pliable. So they make complete armor out of this in a serpentine form, and they also, this armor has wings. Yeah, this armor has wings, and they are the only nation that can fly, because they have this capacity. It is such a light metal, and they have a super military culture, and they train from very, very young, so that everyone is super exercised, and they learn how to fly and fight while flying. And so that's one thing. And the ones that are magically adept also can throw fire with a very specific potion that they make, and they can control and direct the fire. So they have simple dragons and fire-breathing dragons, so to speak. And when in a fight, in a battle, you see them arriving, they really look like these very shiny metal flying beasts. and they cause a lot of fear in any invader, and in some of the allies, because there are rumors that they shapeshift into serpents, which they don't, and they also hate to be told that, all of that. So these are my dragons. And in general, in Art of Veiling, I have a lot of quote unquote mystical creatures that are fighters with very specific gear that works really well for them. Like the invaders have medusas, for example, that are female warriors that are very like gymnastic style athletes, and they have these headdresses with long thongs that have
Okay.
they have at the end they are weighted, these thongs, with metal balls that if they touch you, they give you like a shot of poison that immediately paralyzes you, and so you get quote unquote petrified.
Turn to
And
stone, yeah.
yeah,
Oh.
and they are devastating, but they are also like a glass cannon. They have to hit and run, and appear like beasts because they are basically women, and they are berserker women. They are like half naked and covered with body paint that makes them look like basically these
Monsters.
dismembered giant heads that are coming for you. But if they overstay, they can be slaughtered real quickly. The whole point is on them being very, very scary, hit and cause massive damage, and then leave. And they're very efficient in that until they aren't.
Until they're not.
Oh,
Well.
very cool. Love it.
They wouldn't stand well against the fire-breathing dragons.
No, they wouldn't. and they don't. But not before they actually down like at least 2 or 3 of them, because they are sharpshooters. They have like slingshots, and they toss these things that emit the poison, and they know exactly how to do it, so they drop the dragons.
Well, it's actually speaking of
yeah.
that, I haven't watched Game of Thrones, but I did see this scene where they have people on a ship. They fire a ballista, I think, a giant crossbow, and it hits a dragon. Like the dragon flies out of the clouds, and this thing fires up, and it hits a dragon and just ends it straight away. And I'm thinking, no, that's just dumb. Because back in the 1940s, you had like fighter jets, or not fighter jets, you had fighter planes. In the 1930s, and the 1920s, 1910s, you had fighter planes, which were like aeroplanes that could fly pretty fast. And there's people firing machine guns at these things, thousands of bullets, and not hitting them. Like, it's really, really hard to hit something.
Exactly.
And these guys they crank back a frickin' gigantic crossbow with a huge spear on it and hit this monster with one hit. Yeah, as if.
Yeah.
There's no
that
logic.
that was one of the most stupid things, and they didn't just do it once. They did it like I think twice. It was
Oh
very
my god.
and everyone like that was the season that basically buried the entire series. Like they took a series that was considered some of the best TV of all time, and rightly so, and made it into the worst thing ever. So
Oh, man. Yeah.
If a dragon was real, I think, how would you kill it in fantasy? You couldn't kill it in the air. You couldn't. There's no possible way you could construct any long distance firing thing unless you could harness like gunpowder. Unless you're doing that, there's no way. And even then, you couldn't have a rate of fire of the thing that would be able to just kill the dragon. You'd need to kill it on the ground. Yeah, killing dragons. How would you do it in fantasy? It's impossible to kill a dragon in the air. The Game of Thrones idea is just moronic. Whoever came up with that was an idiot. unless you're on the back of another dragon. Then you could possibly do it. I don't know, you could drop a net on the dragon from another dragon or from another flying creature that would entangle the wings, and that would basically kill it because the thing would fall to its death very easily.
Right.
Or you could, I don't know, maybe you could drop things from the other dragon, but you couldn't, like, a projectile weapon wouldn't be fast enough firing.
Yeah. Or maybe if you could sort of, from another flying creature, you could, assuming you were accomplished enough, drop on the dragon and sort of climb around the dragon.
Kill it.
Yeah, sort of that way. Or force it to do something stupid, like, go slang, like a splat against a mountain or something. That sort of thing.
Yeah, drop acid on it, drop a bunch of bees or wasps, like really distress
Not
the thing
the
and make
bees.
it crash. Not the bees, not the bees. Drop Nicolas Cage on it, possibly. That would end it in 5 seconds. A lot of, I think the early fantasy stories have it right though. You'd have to kill it on the ground and it'd have to be small enough that you could do it. You couldn't kill a gigantic dragon. Basically, there's no way to do that. So humans in the past have been able to kill giant creatures, especially in our Stone Age days, like mammoths and things like that. And we believe usually these people would have got together and scared them off cliffs and things, or rammed stakes into the ground and tricked the mammoths to charge at the stakes and impale themselves. So that's incredibly clever. So that could be our way to kill a dragon.
Well, yeah, but the dragon has scales, and supposedly those are like armor.
Well, they'd have to be really strong.
Yeah.
I mean, you can kill knights in armor with pike staves stuck in the ground. So there are, there are ways to.
I'd say it would be a bet. It would have to be like just the right angle to go in. Otherwise, it would glance off, and then you would have a pissed off dragon.
So there's the knight on his horse with a lance. That's how St. George is meant to have killed the dragon in all the artwork. I think that would work if it's a small enough dragon.
Yeah, and he's usually depicted like spearing it through the mouth. So
yes, he is actually, yeah, which is a vulnerable point.
Mm-hmm.
So mouth spearing by a knight on a horse is a way. I don't think the classic image of a knight with a sword would be much use against a dragon in any way at all. Like, just walking up to a fire-breathing monster with a sword is asking for trouble. That thing's going to kill you. It's going to win. There's no way. I think there was this great anime called, I think, The Gate, where the modern day Japanese military ended up in a fantasy world, and they had to like fight fantasy creatures, and they fought a dragon with a fighter plane. They just shot it with missiles and things. So that was that'll do it.
Yeah, that will stand a chance at least. Like, if you know it, okay.
Right.
That's cheating though. Yeah, that's cheating.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how does a human kill a dragon? It's very tricky.
Yeah.
I think
you would need to have a plan. I mean, you cannot go head on at all.
There there's cases of humans being able to kill very large creatures. I mean, there's gigantic crocodiles that humans had to face, like 7-meter long crocodiles, which is basically a dragon. I mean, if you see something that big, 7 meters as a crocodile, that's a dragon. No question. A giant anaconda, which is like, similar size. Dragon. And huge ravening monsters like, tigers and hippopotamus, rhinoceros.
And even if you have like a gigantic bird, that's a dragon. have you seen how that what's its name? Like not a shoebill, but also a shoebill. The other one that is
that's scary. Well, there's a cassowary which can kill you.
yes, that's the one I was thinking. Or like that's a dragon. That's a dinosaur basically. So
Yeah, they have gigantic legs. They have a huge, big, point on their head, a horn on their head, and they have huge elephant legs. They're monsters. I got chased by one when I was a little kid. It was scary.
oh no.
Yeah. It was, for some reason, like it was in a zoo, but it wasn't in a cage. It was just left to walk around. And it was just following me around the place and it chased me. And I was scared out of my wits.
Oh my god!
Of course, I would be too. I mean,
It's a terrifying bird. Emus are creepy. Emus will give you scary stares. But usually they'll go away. I mean, emus can kill you, but normally they don't. But yeah, cassowaries definitely will. So be wary of the cassowaries. Even ostriches can do it. And ostriches are big birds.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
They're bigger than emus and cassowaries. They're huge. So
and
yeah,
fast.
birds factor in. What's that, Tom?
And fast.
Yeah, very fast. And okay, Komodo dragon, that's a thing. Those things are scary. I remember years ago I was in the zoo, Taronga Zoo I think it was, in Sydney. And they had this amazing sculpture of a gigantic Komodo dragon. And it seemed a bit silly because it was bigger than real life. It was like too big. But it was amusing because I was looking at this thing and I saw this tiny little skink, tiny little lizard climbing on it. And I thought, oh my god, that's a good contrast with this gigantic fake statue of a thing and this little skink. And then the fake statue blinked and moved its head. And I realized, oh my god, it's not a statue. It's a huge thing. It's a monster. So yeah, that was a big wake-up call. Komodo dragons can be very monstrous. Well worthy of their name. So yes.
So yeah, I mean, you could have creatures to fill the requirements.
Definitely. Definitely. And there's some people who believe that, oh my god, dinosaurs were actually dragons, and there's this all crossover between like where these dinosaurs used to be and belief in dragons. But we haven't been able to find any connecting thing in culture that makes a connection, because obviously dinosaurs are extinct long before humans ever evolved, so there's no crossover there. Absolutely no crossover. Dragons, serpents, these creatures never existed when we existed, but there's the bones. But even with the bones, we haven't found any crossover. We haven't found any like holy relics or any culture that like mentions bones in any way and connecting those to dragons.
Yeah, but I mean, you could plausibly say that they would have at least seen some, because not everything was like, some were, I think there was this one book, I don't remember by whom, that sort of suggested plausibly that ancient cultures at least saw some of the fossils, and that would easily make for like creating myths about them. So
yeah, but these are theories. I mean, they're plausible theories, but they don't have any like corroborating like facts that we can point to, which is weird. It's interesting. You'd think there would be, but yeah, there's not even any myths that suggest that they're based on the bones. So, or fossils even, and fossils aren't necessarily bones. Fossils could just be an imprint of the gigantic monster, which is interesting. And not just like the dinosaurs, which we believe are fairly kind of reptilian in appearance, or avian reptilian. There's also the megafauna, which were the gigantic mammals that were after them, and from the bones and the fossils and stuff like that, you could also imagine that they look like dragons as well. But yeah, we still don't have any corroborating, like, factual pieces of evidence for that connection. So it still remains a conjecture rather than fact.
Yeah. For me, honestly, it wouldn't be such a leap to have. Don't really need to see giant bones, assuming you didn't, or anything to create these myths, because all you really need to do is to imagine some creature that is a threat times bigger, and you're all set.
That's why I would tend to think it's more like a crocodilian thing, or a giant snake, or even whales. I mean, they had giant bones, didn't they? What washed up on the shore. Huge creatures, yeah. So yeah, whales, blue whales, are the biggest animals that have ever existed. There's no dinosaur that has gotten to the size of a blue whale, which is fascinating to me. Like,
really?
I always think, no, we hear these gigantic dinosaurs. They're huge, they're monstrous, but apparently the blue whale's bigger than all of them.
Wow, that's wow. I would need to go see that because it sounds so amazing.
It's ridiculous to me that is apparently a fact. But yeah. So yeah, there we are. Blue whales are actually dragons.
Sea dragons.
Sea dragons, yes. Bigger than Loch Ness and all these creatures. And the famous megalodon that people love to talk about. The blue whale's bigger. Way bigger. Well, anyway, we should wrap up this Quackcast. The dragon cast. And I'll have a dragon in the image.
Very cool.
That I
Next
had drawn
week,
myself.
leprechaun.
Leprechauns. Oh my god. Leprechauns. Hey. All right.
Oh, thank you for listening to the Quackcast. Oh, my dragon. Oh.
Can I have your pot of gold? You wee potato eating monster.
Yo, you're very good. Yeah, you're very good. You're excellent.
It is
Hooray!
not. Yours is better. All right. Bye, everyone. This has been Quackcast number 709.